This has been a presentation of KSCI Channel 18, San Bernardino, serving Southern California.
The Dow continues its upward movement this Monday, August the 15th. The recession has seen a record shakeout in American business. Many business people have been forced to take at least temporary shelter under the U.S. bankruptcy laws. Many more have come close, but not quite gone over the edge. In this half hour, we'll be discussing the fine art of bankruptcy brinksmanship with David Jacobs. He's chairman of the management consulting firm of Jacobs & Company. Thank you very much, Bruce. When we come back, John Darren will be talking with David Jacobs, chairman of Jacobs & Company, on how companies can be rescued from the brink of bankruptcy. Be right back.
Despite an apparent economic recovery, bankruptcies are at an all-time high and expected to increase in the next 12 to 18 months. David Jacobs is one of those who provide managerial and financial advice to bankrupt companies in hopes of making them profitable again. It's called turnaround management. It's a new concept, and we'll talk a little bit about how it works, but let's talk a little bit about the problem first. You gave me some figures that were startling. 527,811 bankruptcy petitions in just 1982, and as I indicated, it's going to go up in 83 and possibly 84?
That's right. That's our expectation. The trend in bankruptcy petitions tends to lag the economic recovery. The reason for that is because when the economy starts to turn around, the companies in each industry that are relatively healthy tend to take on additional debt or take on additional equity capital and start to become aggressive again as the markets improve. As they start to advertise and promote their marketing efforts, they capture market share, and those healthy companies start to ride the trend of the economy upward. The companies in that same industry that are relatively weak are hurt by those companies that are capturing market share, and all of a sudden their market shares start to decline. So although they were hanging on during the period of the recession, when the economy starts to recover, all of a sudden they have stronger competitors, and that's when a lot of them tend to hit the wall.
So there could be some companies out there who have been looking for the light at the end of the tunnel, and it, in fact, might be a train coming from the other direction to this point.
Very much so.
If they're not being careful. Now, heretofore, when a company would file Chapter 11, they usually sought some legal protection. That was the conventional approach. What's the difference in your concept, the management turnaround concept?
Well, many of our clients seek the legal protection as well, but that legal protection gives them a safe harbor from their creditors for a period of time during which they can reorganize, restructure their business, and start to have a positive cash flow from their company rather than a negative one which caused the filing in the first place. Some of our clients or companies that we work with are in Chapter 11 under the protection of the courts. Some of them are not. The procedures that we follow are very much the same to make the company a healthier generator of profits and cash flow as part of the reorganization.
Now, a bigger company, and I cited the example earlier to you, like Wix Corporation, brings in a heavy chief executive or a staff of new executives like a Sandy Sigaloff in hopes of turning a company around.
That's right.
The companies you deal with, small and medium companies, aren't in a position to do that. Is that why the need has been created for a turnaround management consultancy, or however you would describe it?
Well, I would change the term consultancy to some extent. We join the management team. In these smaller companies, as you say, they can't bring in the heavyweight, full-blown management team because the asset base isn't large enough. In something like a Wix or a Sambo's, there's so much asset to capture the attention of the banks and the creditors and the management team that something like that, as they have structured it, can be done. In smaller companies, we don't have that level of interest, and people aren't willing to finance that sort of restructuring. So, when we take a look at a company that's, say, doing $10 to $30 million in sales, there are certain functions that they perform very well, the existing management team, and certain functions that they don't. Sometimes it's in the sales area. Almost always it's in the financial area. And we gear our resources to fill in the gaps that they have and join the management team.
So many of these companies don't need a total restructuring, even though they may be in financial trouble. Just some, fine-tuning? Is that what you'd...
Well, I would
Or
describe it
beyond
as
that?
more than fine-tuning, but they need new direction. They need to be able to understand the financial dynamics of their company, what makes money, what doesn't make money, how to present that to their creditors, how to negotiate, to restructure their the contracts with major customers, the supplies from the vendors that they have, which affects their cost of goods sold, and they need to have that spirit and the executive guidance given back to the company, and that's what we try to provide for them.
Is this something they should actually enter into before filing Chapter 11, preferably, if they can, if they have the foresight to see that they need that, or do you usually come in at the point when they're filing for bankruptcy?
The earlier you catch them, the better chance you have of success. The success rate of companies that get into this stage is very low, particularly once they go into Chapter 11. I would estimate less than 1% of the companies that go into Chapter 11 successfully reorganize and come out as healthy companies.
Are some of them so far gone that you feel you can't do anything for them, or is there always kind of a glimmer of hope in most any Chapter 11 situation?
Not always, not always. The first thing that you have to do when you enter a situation like that is determine if there's any economic value being generated by the company. In some cases that we've entered, we've decided no. Some of these companies have had asset bases of, say, $30 million, and you look at the economics of the company, and they can't generate income, they can't generate cash flow. And as a result, it doesn't make sense to pump any more money into them or spend time trying to nurse them along for an additional 6 months, because then it will fail. And that's a waste of time. So you recommend liquidation in those cases.
Yeah. If there is a chance for survival, a turnaround, what are some of the techniques you have to apply that a company might not apply themselves or see the need for?
The first one is the financial analysis. First of all, you have to pull the company apart, product line by product line or category by category, determine what makes money. The gross profit analysis is critical. Based on that and the overhead structure of the company, you can perform a cash flow analysis. Now, this is a very important distinction in working with troubled companies versus working with a healthy company. A healthy company tends to focus on the profit after tax line as their bottom line. Our bottom line is different. Our bottom line is the ending cash position of the company. Now, clearly, profit is a portion of that, but in many of our companies, profit is negative. They're generating losses for a period of time until they can go through the turnaround phase and start generating profits. So there have to be other places that cash comes from. In some situations, cash will come from liquidating certain amounts of inventory, which changes the balance sheet. In some cases, you can collect on accounts receivable. In some cases, you can sell off assets. But the real bottom line that we have to focus on is that cash flow.
Is that advantageous now, I'm sure, not only for paying off creditors, but for reestablishing a line of credit with the bank, refinancing that might be necessary?
Right. If you can demonstrate on a forecasting basis that you can produce cash at some time in the future as a source of repayment for the creditors, then they're willing to work with it as a better source of repayment than a liquidation today. And that's the decision they're making. A bank needs to decide if it's going to pull the plug or not. And we have to convince them not to, if an economic value is being produced.
What are some of the other considerations?
The other functions that we need to add to the company when we join is an ability to coordinate with legal counsel. Companies in this situation tend to be very embroiled in suits with their creditors, and you have to have an appreciation for the sensitivities, the priorities of not only the company but the creditors and what actions they would take.
I'm sure that's probably a case of your having been through this, but the company never having been through bankruptcy before that's significant. And in just a half minute remaining here, what might a company might be watching for as indications that it's about time they looked into this kind of service?
I think a company that's feeling uneasy should take off the rose-colored glasses and look at its own product lines and see if it really makes money or not. Second, it should prepare some detailed cash flow forecasts and start talking to the bankers to determine if they can continue to finance themselves.
And not count on the economic recovery.
Not count on the economic recovery and determine what they do well and shore up their weaknesses.
Good points. We'll continue this conversation later because there's much more here to come. I appreciate it. We'll do it again. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Jacobs & Company Turnaround Management based here in Los Angeles. Some of our affiliates will break away. We'll be back with more programming in just a minute.